Good evening, everyone. My name is Wally Bopkowitz. I'm the City Manager of Evanston. Thank you for joining us for our 2014 Annual Community Budget Workshop. You may not be able to see this, but we are here alone. There is no one that's come out for the budget workshop, but we thought that the presentation we have is useful information for members of the community. So what we'll do is we'll go through that presentation. We would encourage folks, if they're interested, to go to the city's website, www.cityofevanston.org, and get information about our budget process. There's an opportunity to provide feedback to the city as we go through the last several days of community outreach. We have a survey online. We have asked community questions. We've also been out and about in the community asking people to fill out the questionnaire. So again, we have no one here with us at the Lorraine Morton Civic Center this evening, but we will go through the presentation anyway. We'll give you an overview of the city's current budget for 2014. We'll talk about general fund revenues and expenses. We'll talk about our other funds. We'll detail our community engagement, as well as talk about next steps in the budget process through the fall months here in 2014. Next slide. City of Evanston, like all government agencies, have fund-based budgets, and so we budget our funds in different types of funds, and the slide shows you the breakdown. Our general fund, which receives the general tax dollars, property tax, sales tax, permit fees, support our general city operations, and in the case of the City of Evanston, police, fire, community and economic development, health, parks, recreation, and community services. We also have a health department, which in part has a portion of funds that come from the general fund. We also have enterprise funds. We have a very large water treatment and distribution operation. We provide water not only to Evanston, but to Skokie, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Palatine, and Wheeling. And we just announced today, a matter of fact, that we'll be also providing water to the city of Des Plaines. So that enterprise fund, it contains all of the revenues and expenses for our water and sewer. We also operate our trash and recycling in a separate fund, as well as our parking. And then we have a capital improvement funds, funds that we collect either through debt issuance or in other ways for our capital projects, and that are kept in separate funds, as well as special revenue funds. The slide gives the example of our Economic Development Fund, and the Economic Development Fund receives funding from our hotel tax, and those funds from the hotel tax, by and large, are used for economic development activities. So we're fund-based budgets. We'll focus most specifically on the general fund, a couple more. Debt service funds, we collect property tax to pay off our debt service. Our internal service funds, mostly insurance. We are self-insured to a certain level, and then have outside joint powers authorities, which we work with for excess insurance, as well as a separate fund for our vehicle fleet. We have everything from fire ladder trucks to sedans and everything in between, and that is accounted for separately in a fleet fund. And then finally, we have two specific trust funds, such as our police and fire pension funds. Pensions are funded in three different ways. Our police department is covered by one separate fund. Our fire department is covered by a separate fund. And then our general employees are part of the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. And so we have trust funds and the examples of the police and fire pension funds. So I think that takes care of sort of the overview of how we budget. I'd like to introduce Ashley Porta, who is our budget manager, and she'll walk you through the next part of the presentation. Ashley, good evening.
Thank you. As Wally said, my name is Ashley Porta. I'm the budget manager here for the City of Evanston. So to continue with our presentation here, this is kind of outlining the budget process. Right now we're in the yellow portion, the budget preparation and citizen engagement. As Wally also mentioned, we have a survey online. We've been out in the community trying to solicit feedback, and we have had over 100 responses, which is great so far. So we encourage you to go ahead and go online and take that survey. That website is going to be at the end of the presentation. So from here, we are going to present a proposed budget in October, continue with the conversation through November, Throughout all these meetings, citizen comment is welcome if anyone has anything they would like to contribute. We are anticipating a budget adoption November 24th, 2014. Okay, this is a little bit of information about the 2014 budget. The city's budget is $254,627,610 across all funds, but the biggest portion of this is the general fund. General fund is $89 million, and this accounts for police and fire and parks and rec, public works, plowing streets, kind of a lot of the basic functions that the government provides. And here's how that money is kind of collected. As you can see, property tax is only 13.76% of the general fund revenue. We get revenue from a variety of sources, with sales tax being our biggest collection item. We also have a variety of charges for service, and we kind of have a diverse base for this general fund revenue. So of your property tax bill, this is kind of the breakup of where that money goes. So as you can see, the city of Evanston is only collecting 18.06% of your individual property tax bill. The school districts, District 65 and 202 together, are collecting over 65% of your property tax bill. So this is just kind of a visual look at the breakdown of where your property tax dollars are going. And then of the 18.06% of your property tax bill, here's how we are spending that, and kind of our internal division of funding by both dollar and percentage. So as you can see, again, the pensions make up a very large percentage of this. Together, all three of the pension funds are getting almost 40% of that revenue. The general fund is getting 22%. And whatnot. Okay, this slide takes a look at property tax in so much as the library and the city are concerned. As you may know, in 2012 we started breaking out the library tax levy. So the city levy is now lowered, and the library tax is included as a separate line item on your property tax bill, and it's just kind of a graphical depiction of that. And this slide kind of does the same thing. As you can see, the general fund property tax levy has decreased as the library fund property tax levy increased. Again, the library used to receive funding from the general fund levy, and now it does not. So that is kind of how these numbers are working. The pension fund levies have remained fairly constant in the past few years. And yeah. So here's our 2014 general fund expenditures through the end of July. That is 7 months, which means we should be on track for about 58.3% of the budget. This is how it's broken up, all the departments within the general fund. So as you can see, our total expenditures through this time period are 57.7%, so that's slightly under our expected budget. I would like to note that this did include all of our snow expenses that we had earlier this year. So Public Works is right at the percentage of budget that would be expected. So overall, we are spending less money than we have budgeted for so far in 2014. But it is important to note that some expenditures are not always evenly distributed throughout all 12 months. And that is all for the general fund.
Good evening, Marty Lyons, Chief Financial Officer and Assistant City Manager. I'll be walking you through some of the other city funds. The city has over 30 funds, and we mainly, as the city manager pointed out, have funds for specific purposes. As we go through this presentation, we've just given thumbnail sketches for each type of fund. So I'm not going to read all of these off to you, but we do have funds that are organized by type. So our first type is a special revenue fund, where a specific revenue is delineated to fund the operations. And a special revenue fund can have a revenue that is a tax, or it can have a revenue that is a fine, but for the most part, it won't have a revenue that is just a fee. When we have funds that are funded through fees for service, we call those enterprise funds, as I'll show in a moment. So other special revenue funds are Emergency Telephone Systems Fund. As noted, that is funded by a tax on the telephone bill. We have a special service district. That is a special property tax in the downtown that funds economic development and marketing activities for the downtown. And finally, we have a set of funds that are also federal funds. They are our Community Development Block Grant Fund, our Community Development Loan Fund. Those are sister funds. And then, as noted on the next page, we have a Home Fund and Affordable Housing Fund. The Affordable Housing Fund is actually a local fund that works with the Home Fund, as noted, to provide support to low-income housing. Another set of our funds, because the city has a very complex budget that involves both capital and operating, we issue debt service, or rather, we issue debt. And in order to pay our debt back in a timely manner so that all of the lenders that are buying our bonds understand that we pay on a timely manner, we create funds so that they can see that our annual payments are budgeted and funded. So of that, we have a general debt service fund that takes care of all of our property tax funded debt. Then we also have some special debt service funds. The Special Service Area number 5 is also a downtown fund that's only purpose is to pay debt for a previous capital project in the downtown. We list our tax increment financing funds as debt service funds because they quite often have debt service related to a capital project that in turn is paid for by a property tax increment. Finally, we also have our capital projects funds, and these funds are segregated because the funds themselves will have high variations from year to year. So we put them off to the side so people don't think that the city is increasing its budget substantially or decreasing it from year to year. In the case of the Capital Improvements Fund, that tracks all of our above ground capital, such as streets, alley improvements, sidewalks, and a lot of our facilities improvements that are not in their own special fund. Our Special Assessment Fund actually tracks a 50-50 program for alley improvements, wherein the city usually will pay half from general funds, and the other half can either come from residents or from community development block grant funds. As noted before, our enterprise funds, water, sewer, parking, and solid waste, take care of the business operations of the city that are paid for by a fee. So in the case of the Water and Sewer Fund, everyone is familiar with that operation and that we send out bills on a monthly basis. The Solid Waste Fund is a part of our operations that has not been contracted out, so that takes care of yard waste and recycling. It also accounts for all of our outsourced refuse collection in that fund, but we do not have any staff internally accomplishing that function since 2011. And finally, the city does have a lot of services that we support our own external operation with. In the case of all of our departments, they all require fleet. They all require maintenance on that fleet. And we aggregate all of our insurance needs into one area so that we can track them across all funds and be able to account for our total insurance costs, which for 2014 was about $18 million. And that includes health insurance to employees, a benefit, as well as our liability and workers' comp insurance. Trust and agency funds, as the city manager pointed out, our firefighters pension fund and police pension fund. These are separate funds that are solely the responsibility of the board for each fund and the city. As mentioned before, Civilian staff are part of the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, and that is a state-operated fund, independent of the state of Illinois, but still at a state level, that the city has its own separate account for. So we do fund our pension within IMRF, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, separate from, for instance, the Village of Skokie. One of the things that is always a concern and something that we keep track of historically for the city is the number of full-time equivalent staff, or FTE, that we have on staff each year. As this graphic shows, in 2009-10, we had 842 full-time equivalent staff, and the 2014 budget includes 804.78, and that included an increase in both library and city staff for that year. I'd make one note that as we look back on our 5-year projections, in 2008 we had 880 full-time staff, so we're still 10% below our staffing level of 2008-9. So where we, as we've talked with the residents in August at the City Council meeting on August 11th, our estimates for the current year, the city budget and the general fund is running fairly well. This is due in large part to the fact that our revenues are performing a little above budget and our expenses are right at budget. So that allows us to point out that we're running at a slight surplus for the year, and as we move forward through the end of the year, it is likely that our revenues will stay above budget, but it's also possible that our expenses could also get close to budget, given that, Mr. City Manager, what was it? We ended up with $800,000 plus for snow costs. So we do have that large cost for snow that needs to be accounted, and we will watch it all the way through the end of the year. The good news is that the general fund will most likely operate in a surplus for 2014, barring any unforeseen circumstances. Other funds are also operating at or below their budget levels. Quite often our capital funds at this time of the year are still running a little bit behind, where the entire capital project season is just now getting billed out. So that means all of our contractors are now sending in all of their bills for the summer's work, and we're just processing those now. So our capital expenses will catch up towards the end of the year, but none are expected to exceed budget. And what do we expect for 2015? Again, using our best data, which is our current and immediate past data, we think that general fund revenues will remain stable. The building climate is still very strong, so we believe we will have stable, if not increasing, permit revenue. We aren't looking presently at any increases in rates of any substantial amount, but we will consider a few options, so there's no plan for a property tax increase for the general fund. One of the things that we have to account for is, on the expense side, that we have settled all of our labor agreements for 3 years. So in 2014 being the first year of that settlement, we have to account for a 2.5% to 3% increase in wages, and going forward, there will also be another 2.5% to 2.7% increase for the 2015 budget. So we will be accounting for that increase. The good news is we don't have increases in our health care costs. Those have remained very stable over the last 2 years. So we are not looking at an increase to that benefit cost. And finally, as a part of our review of the general fund, we have asked our non-public safety departments to come up with alternatives that could reach a 3% reduction in their budget, so that we can determine if there are ways to fund several one-time costs that we may need to look at that could involve technology, our workforce program, summer youth, and a variety of initiatives that the city would like to proceed with in 2015. And the purpose of the reduction is to see if we can do those without raising any new revenue sources. So our citizen budget outreach, as noted before by Ms. Porta, we already had a event, Streets Alive. We collected many survey recipients that came out for that event. Residents can submit their ideas to the city on the web, by email, Facebook, Twitter, by phone by calling 311, by mail at the city manager's office, or on MindMixer, which is at www.engageevanston.org. Please submit your ideas and suggestions for services, budget savings, or any questions you might have regarding the city's budget going forward. Our schedule for the remainder of this budget season is the proposed budget will be delivered to the council in 1 month. On October 20th, we'll have our first budget discussion, and then we will have a Saturday budget discussion on October 25th. This is a good budget discussion to attend, as it usually will run from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and we have a good long time at that discussion to try and talk about issues of interest to the public, or even dive down into specific programs. And as noted before, we will then have one more meeting. Actually, one more meeting after that, November 10th, and then November 17th if needed, and November 24th would be the budget adoption night. The city adopts a budget resolution. That means that it can be presented on the same night that it is originally written. Our budget resolution isn't created until we're completely done with the council's budget discussion. So any comments prior to that date, which would be the 17th, will be incorporated at the council's direction. I wanted to just take I took a step back. Saturday will also be Saturday, October 25th, will be the public hearing date that is required by law.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons, Ms. Porta. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, you've been able to get a sense of where we're at, and really we're in pretty good shape. The city of Evanston has gone through quite a bit with the economic downturn. I think we've made a lot of changes, but we continue to provide quality services to the residents of Evanston. The purpose of tonight's presentation really was to give everyone an overview of where we're at and allow people to provide input. So even though, as I've mentioned, no one is here with us this evening for the workshop, we do hope that people will watch this online and on the replays on Channel 16 over the next several weeks. And we'll go to our website at www.cityofevanston.org to provide feedback, or call 311. They'll take your feedback. You can come to City Hall. We're certainly committed to having this be an open process. We realize people are busy living their lives, but hopefully with replays of this event online and on cable, people will learn a little bit more about what we're doing with the City of Evanston budget for 2015. With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Lyons and our budget staff for their excellent work in putting the presentation together. Have a good evening.